So with your permission, Professor Arun,
Please.
I had sent you a tentative schedule also. So
Correct.
after the introductory welcome note, we will have a small thematic address by Mr. Ashok Basu, and
Yes.
he wanted to lay down certain expectations in terms of the clarifications that the broader audience expect.
Right.
So
Right.
I
Right.
think if that comes to you beforehand, maybe you would be able to
Sure.
address them. But then after your address, we will have a proper Q&A session,
Sure.
and we'll have that liberty to have the discussions, the right discussions also.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
So thank you so much, sir. So with this uh, introduction, I think let me formally welcome each one of you. So namaskar and welcome to the third expert session of the year 2025, organized by Japuria School of Business on a subject of high relevance for all of us. In fact, Trump tariff has created a mayhem across the world. Economies, markets, industries, people, policymakers, political leaders, institutions like WTO, all alike are engulfed with uncertainties. And I think we all agree on this. World is in a state of flux, accentuating the gravity in the world order because of the existing geopolitical instability in different regions already. Now, my dear friends, young friends, we'll have a detailed introduction of Professor Arun Kumar later, but we have in him a highly acclaimed eminent economist to talk about these situations in his presentation and discussion. And the topic that we chose was, in fact, he only suggested that we should put it as Trump tariff. What of free market and globalization? So I'm delighted to formally welcome the august audience, constituting of few very experienced and accomplished personalities from various walks of life, connected with groups like Learning Together, New Age Leadership Group, Ram Foundation, Rotarians, esteemed members of the Anandaram Japuria group of institutions, faculty, staff, deans, and students of Japuria School of Business. We thank you for your time and interest in the webinar. I must thank respected Dr. Raj of Learning Together group for seeding this idea at the stage when the uncertainties and ignorance amongst people both are peaking. Let me, ladies and gentlemen, on April 2nd, to set the context right, US announced the reciprocal tariffs imposing additional duties ranging from 10% to 50% on imports from all trading partners. And as stated, this move is aimed at addressing the perceived trade imbalances and to boost domestic manufacturing in the US. Turmoil, bloodbath, recession, inflation, retaliation, dragon war have been the buzzwords since then, and then on April 10th morning came the pause button for 90 days. But as you all noticed, more fuel was fed to the dragon war, raising the tariff for them to 125%. The question before us is, what will all these lead to for the world? Does it make economic sense? What impact will it have on free market philosophy of the WTO, as the topic suggests? Or is it that a week's heat domestically in US was good enough to press the pause button? Does it signal any kind of softening of the stance? How would these multiply to further destabilize the world, which was already in disorder because of the political warfares across the regions? Coming to India, how does it impact India and what India should be doing? Many more such questions and issues would surface as the session progresses. My dear friends, it has been a privilege to have Professor Kumar with us. Professor Kumar has been kind enough to join today's session to deliberate upon all these complex issues. And for those who know him well, he is an authority on the subject and for his candid views. In the interest of the audience, particularly the youngsters here, let me have a brief introduction of Professor Kumar. Professor Kumar, known for his incisive analysis and for his forthright views across public platforms, was the Sukhmay Chakrabarti Chair, eminent economist from India, chair professor at JNU at the time of his superannuation in 2015. He is a doctorate in economics from JNU and a master in physics from Princeton University and the Delhi University both. His specialization areas are developmental economics, public finance, public policy, and macroeconomics. His recognition crosses boundaries, and he has been visiting universities like Yale, Columbia, Carnegie Mellon, UNAM, Mexico, universities in Italy and Germany. In fact, Mexico honored him with Ricardo Prize for his work on developmental economics. His book on Black economy in India, has broken new grounds in thinking about the Indian economy, has been published by Penguin in 3 separate editions. The latest was in 2017. His other works are on demonetization, globalization, and its impact on India and issues of public policy. If I start reading his entire bio, I think maybe half of the time of this session can be devoted on that. So I would stop here. Thank you, Professor Kumar, for your generosity and your support always for me and for the institution. Thank you so much, sir. As I said, before I invite Professor Kumar to take up the session, we have Mr. Ashok Basu from Learning Together group in the audience, who would be talking on the theme and highlighting few issues which the audience wants to be touched upon by Professor Kumar. Over to Professor Ashok Basuji. I request you to kindly be short, and if the time could be another 5 minutes. I hope that's okay with you, sir.
It'll be less than that. We
Thank
are
you.
all very keen to listen to Dr. Arun Kumar. He's an authority in this area.
If
I
you could be
am
little
just
closer to the mic, I think that
Is-
will be little,
is this better?
yes, better than before.
All right. So I might be having some hardware difficulties,
No,
but if
this is
this is
fine, sir.
good,
Please
then
go ahead,
this
sir.
is fine. That's
Please
great.
go ahead. I think
As I said, I will be less than 5 minutes. It's very short. I am not a professor. I am an ex-banker, and I have lived through the times of 1991 during, when we were just about to default and things like that. And this particular event has actually knocked everybody off their kind of comfort zones. So thank you, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Thank you, Dr. Arun Kumar, for your generosity to be present for this discussion. Greetings, friends. Today we gather to explore an action that has roiled the trade and destroyed markets. Trump's tariffs, what of free markets and globalization? It's a topic that brings into focus not just economic policy, but ideology, geopolitics, and the changing face of capitalism itself. Capitalism and world order, if I may put it that. The Trump's administration's approach to trade was a dramatic departure from the traditional US support for free markets. Through a series of sweeping tariffs on goods from China, the EU, and even close allies like Canada and Mexico, the administration effectively launched a new era of protectionism. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
These tariffs.
You are on muted, sir. You are muted. Kindly unmute, sir. Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
These tariffs, justified in the name of national security and trade fairness, signaled a pushback against decades of globalization. Professor Joseph Stiglitz, in his book Globalization and Its Discontents, warned us long before Trump that globalization today is not working in many parts of the world. He pointed out that while global trade has lifted millions out of poverty, it has also deepened inequality and eroded the social contract in many advanced economies. Trump's tariffs tapped into that discontent among those who felt left behind by the outsourcing, by automation, and by wage stagnation. From a technical perspective, tariffs act as a tax on imports intended to protect domestic industry. But in practice, they often lead to higher consumer prices and disruption of global supply chains. So while tariffs may seem like a quick fix, the long-term economic efficiency losses can be significant. Dr. Raghuram Rajan in Fault Lines highlights another key aspect, the political pressures that drive protectionist policies. He writes, the political response to inequality has not been to broaden support for those displaced by globalization, but to turn inward. This points to a deeper concern, not just about economics, but about the legitimacy of the global economic order. So, where do we stand now? Are we witnessing the collapse of globalization or merely a recalibration? Are we shifting from free trade to fair trade where strategic interests override pure market logic? Today, we'll reflect on some of these questions, not just in the context of Trump, but in the broader global perspective. As we weigh the costs and benefits of globalization, we must ask, can the ideals of free markets survive without addressing the inequalities they often exacerbate? Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to say. I hope this has provided a kind of summary or a kind of context for the discussion. Of course, Professor Arun Kumar knows a lot better, and we all keenly await your deliberations on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ashok, for that particular outline. And also, I would say that you have already created some kind of a dilemma in the mind of people, and which certainly will be addressed by Professor Arun Kumar. So, without losing any more time, I hand over the floor to Dr. Arun Kumar. Shantiji, kindly share the screen and the PPT, please. उनको राइट दीजिएगा तपन जी you can also help
sir right है sir we have given the right to sir you can share your screen yes
Can you see the screen?
yes,
yeah
sir.
we can see it sir but you can maximize it I mean make it a full screen if you want
Okay.
yeah
The full screen would be better, sir.
It's somehow denying that. Okay.
no it's
come.
okay sir it has come
Yeah, it's come. So, thank you very much, Dr. Rajiv. Thank you for inviting me to this very interesting discussion. I want to address this issue that has, exercised the entire globe at the moment. All the countries are now facing the problem. So, as an introduction, I think we've already heard, Dr. Rajiv and Dr. Ashok Basu, they've introduced the issue very well. So let me say that April 2, 2025 was characterized by President Trump as the Liberation Day. And that is quite significant because in a sense, there was a ring of justification in the argument when he said that there has to be reciprocity. So even though what he has done is not reciprocity, but at least that he tried to justify why he was levying these tariffs. But I'll argue that the high tariffs that he's levying or he's proposing to levy, those are actually protectionist and not really reciprocal. Now we see that there is a pause of earlier there was a pause of 1 month up to April, and now there's a pause of 90 days in the implementation, except for China. The tariffs already, Dr. Rajiv has pointed out, for China have already gone above 100%. So there, it's really very high. But what is happening is that why is there a pause in implementation? We need to understand. I think there are several reasons for that. One of them is that he's trying to buy time to bargain with individual nations. Of course, the stock market turmoil, the stock market rapid decline, the change in the interest rates that was coming about in the bond market and so on, all that was forcing his hand. It was becoming clear that things were going out of hand. So it's a bargaining chip as well as a response to the turmoil that was forcing his hand. So the question is, why this delay in implementation? And that, is that except for China, and the China's situation is that two biggest economies are locked in a fight to finish. That's the way it appears, because China is retaliating. When Trump introduced the tariff, the Chinese retaliated. At each step, they're retaliating. They're not giving way to the American bullying. It looks like bullying because the tariffs are way beyond what the difference in the tariffs between these two countries is. And I think what the situation is that there is an attempt by the US to prevent China from rising because it is feared that China will globally dominate. It has already become the manufacturing hub of the world. It produces a major share of the global manufacturing output. And that's why it has a huge trade surplus with the entire world and has a huge amount of reserves, about $3.5 trillion of reserves, with which it is pushing its political and economic agenda over the entire world. And as I said, the reason why Trump also gave a pause of 90 days is that the stock markets have begun to signal recession. Some of the big players in the market, like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and so on, they are saying there's a 40%, 60% chance that a recession is coming. And if that happens, it would devastate not only the world, but the US also. So it's not that US will escape the kind of recession that is coming. Another reason why President Trump may have given a pause is that there were large protests in the US. Almost every major city in the US saw protests against Trump's policies. And some of these protests were also in European cities. Another reason is that courts have been intervening to stop some of President Trump's actions, like retrenching people in the government and some of the other policies that President Trump has been trying to propose. And I think this political impact of a recession would be very high because in the US, another election is coming in 1.5 years for 1/3 of the Senate and for the Congress. And in those elections, if there is a recession and prices remain high, then the chances are that the Republicans would lose their majority in both the Senate and the Congress. So the trifecta on which President Trump was depending to push his policies, and the trifecta is the domination of the conservatives in the Supreme Court, the presidency, and the majority in Senate and Congress. That's the trifecta. That trifecta would go, and there would be a lot of resistance, greater resistance to Trump's policies both in the Senate and the Congress if the majority is lost. So these are some of the reasons why I think this delay in implementation is there. It's not only economic, but also political, and the protest that is taking place all over the world, and especially in the US. Now, why all this is happening is, in my judgment, capitalism is replacing its soft face. Sorry, the heading is wrong. Replacing the soft face by a hard face. And this has been happening increasingly since 1991, when the collapse of the Soviet Union took place and the developing world was left with no alternative. We saw this in the 1980s with the replacement of GATT by WTO. The Indian negotiator in the 1982 GATT negotiations, he told me that US told him, the US ambassador to GATT told him in 1982 that now you don't have Soviet Union to defend, so we want to capture your agriculture markets. And therefore, in a sense, that move to capture the markets of the developing world started in the 80s as the power of the Soviet Union declined, and as China took a 180-degree turn after Mao is passing away and Deng Xiaoping taking over. So that's why in the 1987 Uruguay round of negotiations at Ponta del Este, you find all the new issues were introduced under GATT, say TRIPS, TRIMS, trade in services, trade in agriculture, setting up of WTO, the dispute mechanism, all of these were set up. And as soon as the Soviet Union collapse took place, aid was replaced by capital flows. So prior to 1991, the developing world was being given aid. Now, that also has certain connotations. I'm not going to go into that, but that was replaced by you have to give concessions to attract capital. So instead of the aid being given on soft terms to the developing world, now you had to compete for capital across the nations. What happened as a result was that capital became highly mobile, while labor's restrictions continued. So capital has gained upper hand. And you could see that, like, for instance, in 1983, when in France, President Mitterrand, the socialist, came to power, he tried to change policies, but within 3 days, he had to reverse the policies because of the massive flight of capital that took place from France. Similarly, when Nelson Mandela came to power in South Africa in 1994, within a month, he had to reverse policies because, again, of the capital flight. So mobility of capital has been growing. It has grown dramatically all over the world, and that has restricted labor rights. Now, all this has led to what I call the rightward drift across the world, whether it be Europe or Asia or Latin America, etc. I wrote an article in 1993 after the demolition of the Babri Masjid and said that in India, the rightward drift started in the mid-70s with the emergency. So this rightward drift, marginalized the marginals, and therefore what you see is that across the world, the inequalities have increased, the marginalization has grown. So even though across countries, the gap has reduced with the growth of China, Southeast Asia, India, but within each country, it has grown. And Krugman had a paper, I think it was in 2005, where he pointed out that at that point of time, in the US, inequalities were greater than what they were since the time of the Great Depression in the late 20s and the early 30s. So this marginalization has continued with globalization, and this has been one of the factors that has brought about a crisis of capitalism. So the question arises, what is the implication of free market argument? Because now if everybody levies tariffs, then how would free market argument survive? But strangely, Trump is also a free marketeer. He wants to reduce the role of government in the economy, and he wants to give more freedom to big business. So in a sense, he's using the free market logic actually to bring about more of government in protection of the market, but not in the role within the economy. So there's a free market within the economy, but not across the globe. That's the kind of thing that's working. But the point is that the free market argument really is the first best argument, but it doesn't really work under the second best, And the second best is the reality. And under second best, you need government intervention. Actually, even under the first best, when there is market failure, and there are different kinds of market failure, as we have studied, whether it be public goods or it be increasing returns to scale or merit wants or information asymmetry, there are different kinds of market failure. Even there, you require government action when there's a market failure. But under the second best situation, this becomes even more stringent. So the first best is hypothetical, while the second best is actually the reality. And therefore, government intervention would continue if the economy has to achieve optimality. So in a sense, this free market argument that Trump is advancing is actually just within the economy, but not across the globe. Now, what is the rationale for the proposed tariffs? First, the levy is 10% across the board on all imports entering the USA from April 2nd, and the much higher tariffs were to come into play from April 9th. And these were to come into play on the biggest trading partners. But as I said, this has very little to do with reciprocity, because the kind of tariffs that have been levied, they are not commensurate with the gap in the tariff between USA and its trading partners. So how is this calculated? The tariffs that have been imposed is calculated on the basis of the USA's trade deficit with that partner, divided by the export from that country, or what is the import of the USA from that country. So this gives a percentage, and this half that percentage is being levied. So in a sense, say for India, this ratio of the trade surplus divided by the export from India comes to about 54%. So half of that becomes 27%. But how does that change anything? Because the average tariff levied by India on imports is 17%, while the US levies 3%. So at best, the gap can be said to be 14%, not 27%. Similarly, in the case of USA, initially it was 54%, and the gap between the US tariffs and the Chinese tariffs is not 54%. It's hardly a few percentage points. Similarly, on Vietnam, the tariff imposed about 46%, and the gap between US tariffs and Vietnam's tariff is not 46%. So in a sense, this is a pretty spurious calculation. And what I argue is that this will not close the deficit, but it will damage the economy. So you are trying to say that we will deal with the deficit by damaging our own economy, and that's like cutting off the nose to cure a cold. So internal production and supply chains cannot change so quickly in the US that this deficit can be closed. So the deficit would continue in spite of the kind of protectionist moves that are there. So it'll disturb the entire world economy without sorting out the problem of the high deficit that the US runs with the rest of the world. Now, so the question arises, why is all this happening? This trade war is actually due to the challenge facing capitalism. And what is the challenge? USA is not able to generate enough good jobs for its workers. And that's why President Trump has been blaming China, Mexico, India, etc., for loss of jobs in the USA. And he's been characterizing India as a tariff king. And he was promising during the elections, not only now, but even in the earlier elections, that he would bring good jobs back from China, Mexico, and India, that the loss of jobs to these countries was as a result of the incorrect trade policies being followed by the US economy. And therefore, even in the last term, in the first term of presidency, he was asking the US auto companies to return to the US and not set up plants in Mexico, China, etc., etc. So he's been pressing the US companies to invest in the US. And you can see even during the pandemic, supply chain disruptions were there, which led to increase in prices. Post the pandemic, the inflation rate was very high everywhere. So he has been wanting to shorten the supply chains and bring capital back from other countries back to US. And you could see that this was having an effect. All big businessmen were lining up at his residence in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, before he actually took oath on 20th January. They were all meeting him and promising big investments in the US. So even some of the Arab countries, the heads of the Arab countries, even they visited and they promised big investment in the US. So he's been trying to see how investment in the US could increase so that, there could be more employment generation in the US itself. So the question that arises in this context is that there's been a division of labor which has expanded globally. And this division of labor is between high technology, intermediate technology, and low technology. High technology is not made available to the developing world in spite of the WTO provisions of free trade, etc. Intermediate technology and low technology has been offered to the developing world on the basis of payment of royalty. The same intermediate technology, like for instance in production of automobiles or in the production of steel, etc., is available to the developing world. And the advantage that the developing world has is that there are low wages. So therefore, it can produce these commodities, the intermediate technology goods and low technology goods, at very cheap prices compared to the developed countries. So this is the way the high technology production getting more and more concentrated in the advanced countries, and the intermediate and low technology production in the developing world. This kind of division of labor has been there, and the multinationals, to try and make higher profits, have been increasing their supply chains, getting goods cheap from different parts of the world and producing them cheap. Now, as a result, what's happening is that there's a competition among the developing world countries. So like, for instance, in textiles, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh, China, Hawaii, and so on, they're all producing textiles very cheap. Similarly, for cars being being produced in different countries and being sold in the advanced countries. So in a sense, what's happening is that this competition among the developing countries keeps prices low. And therefore, the advanced countries, which are producing high technology goods and services, benefit in the aggregate from this division of labor, which provides the wage goods very cheap to the advanced countries. So the terms of trade, in a sense, a shift. Now, the services sector is the overwhelming part of the advanced economies. They're producing 75, 80% of their GDP from services. And they got advantage in the services sector from the WTO, which they have been dominating. So there'd be banking, insurance, and other kinds of services like software, computers, and various other such things. So this division of labor was to the benefit of the advanced countries, because they could get the cheap wage goods, which kept their inflation low and which also enhanced the profitability of the multinational companies. So the terms of trade, this is the terms of trade between the advanced countries and the backward countries, that was moving in favor of the advanced countries. So the advanced countries could live beyond their means, especially the USA. USA could have a high trade deficit, but because dollar was the reserve currency for the world, they could push their dollars out. So trillions of dollars have been pushed out of the US, which means the US gets an interest-free loan and it can live beyond its means. And as a result, the US can have a high trade deficit and can have a higher budget deficit. Both these reflect that the US is living beyond its means. This has benefited. So even though jobs of the intermediate technology kind may have been lost, but the US and the other advanced countries have been benefiting out of this terms of trade shift. So the catch is that the production of advanced technology goods and services are highly automated, and they don't offer much employment. So that is the catch, that while their wage goods are cheap, while they're able to live beyond their means, they're not providing good jobs to the blue-collar workers. And the blue-worker collars in the Rust Belt were very unhappy. The Rust Belt is where earlier the production of these intermediate technology goods was taking place, and the workers were getting good jobs and good salaries. But now, because those are lost, so the blue-collar workers have been unhappy, and they have actually supported Trump when he says that I'll bring these jobs back to the US. So the point is that US cannot produce these intermediate technology goods cheaply with its high minimum wages. As you know, in the USA, the minimum wage is $15 per hour. And in the various sectors, like automobile and so on, you can go up to $25, $30 per hour. Now at $15 per hour, a worker working 8 hours in the day would get 12,000 rupees per day. Whereas in India, large number of workers are working at less than 10,000 rupees a month. So the wage gap is enormous. And therefore, in a sense, the trade war will aggravate the problem further for the US and the world as other nations retaliate in this. And the US, if it wants to produce the intermediate technology goods cheaply with its high minimum wages, it'll have to give permanent protection to these. That means these tariffs will have to be permanently levied at a high level so that the production can take place in the US. Otherwise, it'll remain in the developing countries. And therefore, in a sense, if you have a permanent protection for these intermediate technology goods, then the problem for the world and for the US will continue, because as the US levies high tariffs, other nations will also retaliate, and the problem will only aggravate further. So what are the consequences for the US? So whichever way we see, high tariffs on imports will lead to price rise in the USA. Now, suppose the US tries to produce within the economy, and that will be difficult because it will be difficult to ramp up production so quickly and suddenly re-switch the supply chains from where you're getting the goods and the inputs currently. So the bottlenecks will appear. So either way, the internal production cannot be ramped up, supply chain bottlenecks will appear, and therefore that will create inflation. And if one is not able to ramp up production quickly enough and the imports continue, then because of the tariff, the prices will rise. So whether you produce internally or you try to produce internally or you continue to import, this tariff that has been levied will lead to a higher level of inflation in the US economy. And as I said, if you want to produce, then permanently you have to have these high tariffs on the intermediate technology goods, which will mean a permanent rise in the price level in the economy. So the other argument that is given in this context is that because of the possibility of a recession, the commodity prices will fall. And when the commodity prices fall, that will help in controlling the inflation. But my argument is that in the net, because of the supply chain disruptions, in spite of the commodity prices declining to begin with, what will happen is that inflation would continue to kick in. And the result will be that if there's a recession or if the prices continue to remain high, then the demand from workers will go down because the workers' wages will not go up. Because if the workers' wages go up, then you require further protection. So the workers' wages remaining unchanged, and with the high tariffs and inflation, the demand will reduce, and that will reduce the output in the US economy. So in a sense, you have on the one hand a decline in output, on the other hand a rise in prices, and that is stagflationary. And to deal with stagflation becomes difficult for fiscal monetary policies, because if you try to cut interest rates, then inflation kicks up. If you try to raise the interest rates, then what happens is that the output begins to drop. So it is hard to deal with such stagflationary situations which are created within the economy. So in addition to this, the US is already reducing decent employment in the government. So on the one hand, Trump's policy says we'll bring back the decent employment in the intermediate technology production in automobiles and in metals and so on. And on the other hand, he's reducing the size of the government because he's a free marketeer who believes that the government should retreat and the government, the employment should be curtailed. So you see the closure of the education department, 20,000 employees being retrenched from the health department, the closure of the USAID, and the various other things that Trump is trying to do to cut back on the government employment. So this will further lower the demand. So the decrease in demand coming because of price rise, because of tariffs, will be further aggravated by the reduction in the decent employment in the government that is there in the US. So what has happened is that President Trump has caused massive uncertainty globally. And this has been happening since October, because President Trump has been saying that he's going to implement these policies. So even before he won, he's been threatening that if he gets to power, he would do that. And that has been impacting the financial markets. And when the financial markets get impacted by uncertainty, what do? They move towards a greater certainty. And the greater certainty was being provided at that point of time by the dollar and by the gold. So the dollar prices and the gold prices begin to rise. And when dollar prices and gold prices begin to rise, then investments get affected. And from the stock markets, the investments have been moving out from India and from the other stock markets, and that has impacted the value of the currencies vis-a-vis dollar. So you saw to begin with that the various currencies were depreciating vis-a-vis the dollar because the dollar provided a certain degree of certainty. Gold prices also divert investment away from the real economy to the financial without really having an impact on it. So this effect on the investment then begins to affect output, because the more investment you have, the higher the level of output that you have in the economy. And if investment uncertainty comes, then the output gets impacted also. So what is happening is that deglobalization has been set in motion in the world economy. And we've already seen a move toward de-dollarization since Ukraine war, because what happened was that the US was impacting the Russian currency ruble. It sort of didn't allow trade in ruble, and therefore China and the Russians, they have been trying to set up an alternative to the SWIFT mechanism for international trade, and also trying to trade in other currencies, because there was restrictions put on the trade that Russia was having with other economies. That was the sanctions, the big sanctions that were there. So sanctions have been there against Iran, earlier also against North Korea, and then against Russia. Also, the reserves of Russia were frozen. So therefore, there's been a move to shift away from holding reserves in dollar. So there is a move for de-dollarization, and the BRICS countries, they have been talking about it, that they should set up a trade in mutual terms. And this BRICS is also expanding with new countries also joining in. So it is becoming a bigger and bigger bloc. So if this de-dollarization accelerates, that will have an impact on the US, because then the US will not be able to live beyond its means. And that's why President Trump had threatened that if BRICS goes in for de-dollarization of the world economy, he would impose a 100% tariff on the BRICS countries. So in a sense, what is happening is that multilateralism may be replaced by bilateralism, because the US would try and break any kind of unity that may emerge between other countries. So this threat is that if US bargains bilaterally, then multilateralism and WTO, their existence will be a big problem. Also, with what President Trump is doing, trust between nations will decline, because it may appear that nations can change policies arbitrarily without any sort of logic that the multilateralism provides. So the need is for other nations to confront the USA, so that the USA is forced to withdraw its very irrational policy of protectionism and the deglobalization that is taking place. As far as the workers and the marginalized sections are concerned, globalization did not benefit the workers, because, as I said, capital mobility was there, and therefore they could extract concessions from various national economies. So workers were getting marginalized. But deglobalization will further worsen the situation with the tariff war and with the decline in output, possible recession, and the continued increase in prices that may take place with the kind of deglobalization that is coming in at the moment. So to conclude, the impact is most acute on the unorganized and the marginalized sections. The other sections can weather the storm a bit better. And the threat is with the rapid spread of artificial intelligence, the marginalized sections will suffer further, because there will be a massive displacement of employment. So while artificial intelligence may help in a variety of ways and may give certain jobs in the AI sector itself as the AI sector expands, but large number of the marginalized section of people, they will be displaced because they don't have the skill to be able to use AI or to be able to get into the AI sector, but given the low level of education and the low level of training that they have. And you see, the AI, what it will do is, earlier, I mean, there's an argument given that whenever technology changes, there's a resistance because some people get left behind. But there is a shift that is taking place because earlier the technology was displacing physical labor and not mental labor. So, for instance, in the fields in agriculture, the crop cutting was being done by harvester combines, sowing was being done by tractors and displacing the bullock and the man behind the bullock. But now what's happening is mental labor is being displaced. So the work of doctors, lawyers, chartered accountant, artists, these is being displaced by AI. So in addition to what is doing about fake news and various other things, the threat is that a large number of very skilled people, their work will be displaced. So say, for instance, for a lawyer, the AI will create the basic document, which otherwise would take many days to create. And all he has to do is fill up the various blanks, the names and the specificities that would be required. Similarly, for a doctor, the AI can give a preliminary report so that the technicians and the nurses that are required along with the doctors would be less. I already know of a device using artificial intelligence that you can point the mobile phone at somebody's forehead, and that will automatically give you the blood pressure reading and the sugar reading and so on. There is another app which is available. You point at your skin, and whatever is the skin problem, that AI will tell you what is the skin problem that is there. Now, in both these cases, the developers have already said that they're not making it very accurate because they don't want to threaten doctors. Otherwise, doctors will not use those, the apps that are being created. So in a sense, the threat is already there of a lot of skilled jobs getting displaced. And where people can go, that is not very clear. So this problem of unemployment, which has triggered the kind of crisis that has come, where Trump is trying to bring jobs back to the US, but AI is threatening unemployment in a very big way all over the world. Some estimates are that maybe the unemployment rate would climb to 40–50%. And that's why the universal basic income idea has been appealing to some people, that if there's that kind of unemployment and people don't have the purchasing power, then the demand would collapse further. So universal basic income has been thought about it. But Elon Musk has set up a huge computer center called Colossus in Tennessee, which he did in 19 days. And that has 100,000 NVIDIA M100 GPUs to calculate. Now, you know that most of the people who work with GPUs work with 1, 2, 5, 10 GPUs. And India is also trying to import 10,000 GPUs in the next 5 years. And Elon Musk has already set up a computer center with 100,000 M100 GPUs. And he's putting in another M200 chips, 100,000 of them in 2025. So Elon Musk, in a conference in Saudi Arabia in December, said that within 1 year, AI can do anything that a human being can do. So that's a big threat. And he said there's a 10 to 20% chance that something bad will happen as a result of such a large development of AI. But anyway, there's a mad rush to develop AI. The US under Trump is promising $500 billion. The others like Meta and so on are racing ahead with AI. China is racing ahead with its AI, with the DeepSeek coming. It has upturned the American lead. So there's a huge this thing. So in effect, the delay in implementation of tariff except against China is to bargain individually, and this will reflect the hard face of capitalism. It's also an attempt to bring down China's power. If you levy more than 100% tariff on each other, that'll affect the global trade dramatically, and it'll create huge problems for all the economies, not just China's economy. Now, China has a chance to become a dominant power if it does not start dumping and gets the trust of other nations. Most nations fear that China would start dumping its excess, which it cannot supply to the US, because at more than 100% tariff, clearly it will get out competed in the US market, and the US sales in China, they'll get out competed. So therefore, other nations would step in. China with its surplus, US with its surplus would try and also do dumping. So there could be a threat of dumping in various parts of the world because of this entire thing. So the entire global economy would get affected. So the question is, as was asked, what should India do? We cannot control the external environment, but we must control the internal environment. That is, we must reduce our inflation, because the imported inflation will come if the rupee weakens further. And therefore, if we have to control the internal inflation, we must use fiscal policies by reducing GST and the excise duties and so on, especially like on energy, where we have recently, not taken the advantage of a decline in the the oil prices that have taken place. We have kept the price unchanged. We could have reduced it to reduce internal inflation. So fiscal policies have to be used to do that. The other thing that needs to be done is to support the micro sector and the agriculture, where bulk of our employment is. 94% of the employment is in the unorganized sector, in agriculture, and in the non-agriculture unorganized sector. They need to be given a boost so that the production there continues, and the problems that will come for agriculture as a result of high tariffs on agriculture goods will mean the prices here would be softening. And that will soften the income of the agriculturists. And 60% of the population depends in some form or the other on agriculture. And the last survey of 2017-18 showed that an average agriculturist earns only 27 rupees per person per day from agriculture. And that's close to the poverty line. So if we support agriculture and we support the unorganized micro sector and small sector, then we can boost employment, and therefore our production will not decline. And I give the example of 2007 to 2009, when the entire world was going into recession. We boosted the agriculture sector, we boosted the rural sector by starting the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, midday meal scheme, right to food and the right to education and so on. So we pumped in about 2 lakh crores worth of demand within the rural economy. And because the rural economy is not so globalized, the demand does not leak out so much from that rural economy. So if we again do something similar with our unorganized sector, then we can weather the storm better. So we will be singed by this global problem, but we'll be singed less if we take care of the internal things. The other thing is while we are negotiating with the US, we must continue to negotiate with other countries, so that the negative effect of the trade with the US, we can try and overcome by negotiation with other countries. And we should try and give a leadership to the world by saying that let's not do dumping, let's not increase tariffs against each other, so that we can increase the trade amongst ourselves to compensate for the trade decline that would take place as a result of the higher tariffs in the US. So in brief, the steps that Trump has taken, rather than mitigating the growing crisis of demand, what it is doing is it is going to aggravate the problem of demand, and the stock markets are reflecting that. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been quite enlightening, and as usual. And I think I would resist myself from giving any kind of summary or some kind of overview of what the highlights of what Dr. Arun Kumar has said. But I think I just I get reminded after your analysis, sir, that this, and especially when you mention that these initiatives, these policies that Trump has initiated, ultimately it is going to adversely affect the US economy, leave aside the world. And I think on the day of his the oath taking, we had one professor from Georgetown University, and I was watching NDTV, and he mentioned that I think logic and rationality and Trump, these are the two opposite poles. So I think even Dr. Arun Kumar was present with him, and in deciding these policies, I think he would not have prevailed upon his decision. So I think that's come out very, very clear. So we would like to take up a few of the questions. I can see a few of them on the chat box. And I have three questions in my hand, which was sent to me beforehand. I will take up first Dilip Trivedi ji. I think your question would have been by and large answered. How real are the chances of recession in US, at least in short term, as an aftermath, and how much will that affect the world economy? I think this has been quite elaborately discussed, but still, if you have any point, you can come on the screen and speak if you're there, sir. Dilip Trivedi ji, you can raise your hand and you can. Are you there?
Yes, can I speak now?
Yes, sir. Very briefly, your question, sir.
No, the question is, as you mentioned very relevantly, it has been answered and the answer is clear. So there is another question which I put in the chat box. If would you like to take it later or can we take it now? Because recently India has refused joining the BRICS trading system. So what are the pros and cons for India for this?
Okay, we will take it up little later, sir. I'll
That's okay.
go
That's
to
okay.
the little basic ones. So I
Sure.
think there is one of the student from Jaipur School of Business who has posted, just a sec. Uh, What were the key provisions of the phase one deal? Akul, I mean, could you mention what is that phase one you are referring to? Please unmute and be little quick. Can you do that? Professor Kumar, does it make sense? His question is, what were the key provisions of the phase one deal?
So what is the deal? I mean, at the moment, there is really no deal as such. What is happening is that, everybody is floundering. Everybody's trying to figure out what should be done and how these tariffs, so EU is trying to figure out, EU already threatened and now it's withheld for 90 days. China threatened. India is trying to take a soft stand, not come out openly. India is not announcing anything, hoping that we would come to a deal with the US. There's a trade talk that's going on between India and the US, which hopefully is expected to be completed by September, October. But let me say that, as far as our free trade deals have been concerned, we have not really benefited from them. If you look at Southeast Asia, Korea, where we'd had some kind of deals, we actually lost out because they increased their exports, but we could not increase our exports. Similarly, with Britain, we've been having a negotiation going on for many years, and we've not been able to complete because you see, technology is the key. In technology, we have lagged far behind. So those who have better technology, they are able to take advantage of the free trade agreements. And that's why you can see that from China, we have a $83 billion trade deficit. And this 83 billion trade deficit is made up of not only goods which are of high technology, like, for instance, electronic components, like APIs for pharmaceuticals, automobile components, and so on, but also low technology items, like, for instance, the manja for the patang that comes, the Ganesh ki murti, the lights for Diwali, the pichkari and the for Holi. So even our cultural symbols are coming more cheaply from there because they're able to produce at scale and they have very good marketing. So they do very good marketing research. They find out what is required in various countries and they're able to market that. Not only that, they're able to market very good high quality and low quality. I had visited Shanghai in 2008 and I was told by the Chinese friends who were there in the academy, they said we can provide grade A, grade B, grade C. You tell us the price at which you want the good and we will provide the high quality good, intermediate quality good or low technology good. So they, for the Indian market, like for instance, the battery lights and the other things that come are of lower quality because those can sell at very low prices and people will buy that. And that is damaging our unorganized sector, that's damaging our small sector and the micro sector, things that could be produced. So that's affecting our employment. So in other words, you see, India needs to emphasize its technology. There we have only very few areas we are able to compete any way in technology. But most of the technology, we are not able to compete with. So we are, selling to the Chinese the various raw materials, rather than technology items. So this is something that we have to worry about in the context of the trade agreements that we go in for, that we should not lose out further, especially our agriculture. An average Indian agriculturist is earning 27 rupees per person per day in 2017-18. Is a very low income. Whereas in America, an average farmer gets a 26 lakh rupees subsidy. So the average American farmer is getting a 26 lakh rupees subsidy in the year, and our farmers are earning maybe 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 rupees per annum. So the competition in agriculture is not possible. So you can look at it, about 60% still depend on agriculture. Now, if these people who depend on agriculture, they find that the tariffs in US remain high, then they cannot export. And if they cannot export, then the price in India will drop. If the Indian government agrees to lower the tariffs, then American goods will come, whether it be corn, whether it be chicken legs and various other things, and then these farmers will suffer. So either way, the farmers could suffer. So we have to protect the interests of the farmers, because that's 60% of the workforce. So not 46% of the workforce, but 60% depend on farmers. So therefore, we have to be very careful in these trade negotiations. And what strategy the government will adopt, they have not revealed the strategy for negotiation. And they're constantly saying in TV debates that I've participated, the government spokespersons and those speaking on behalf of the government, they said, we cannot reveal the strategy, that TV debates are not the places to reveal strategy. So public at large doesn't know what strategy is being followed.
Right, sir. Thank you. And I think, sir, in the interest of time, though we will be devoting next 15-20 minutes on question answer, if that is okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
We have quite a few questions, and if you could devote briefly on each of them,
Okay.
and I would like to combine few of these questions together. However, you again, something very closer to what you have already explained. Mr. Arun Roy has a question who says that hasn't globalization since the coining of the word been an artificial idea vis-a-vis self-interest, which is natural? I hope I'm clear.
Yeah.
Ha-
So,
Why only Trump? Did America ever follow globalization, unless, of course, when it suited it?
So, globalization is not a new concept. Globalization means exchange of goods, services, technology, ideas, capital also. So this has been going on in the world for 2000 years plus. When, Buddhism went from India up to Japan, that was globalization. India was trading with Southeast Asia and Africa, that was also globalization. But what happened is from 1750 onward, if you see Paul Kennedy's book, 1750, India and China were producing together 57% of the world manufacturing output. And by 1900, it became 13%. And Europe, which was producing 23%, went to 57%. And the USA, which was producing 0.1%, went to 21%. So suddenly, with colonization, the globalization, which was two-way, became one-way globalization. So one-way globalization means that all influences are coming from outside. So whether it be technology, whether it be, capital, and so on and so forth. So what has happened is globalization has been in the favor of the advanced countries. And in WTO also, if you remember the WTO negotiations, actually the Dunkel draft was produced. When in 1987 at Puente del Este, the negotiations began, India and Brazil were made the leaders. But India went into problem with Rajiv Gandhi and Brazil went into problem. So the developing world could not present its case. And therefore, the Dunkel draft contained the position of the advanced countries. And then in square brackets, it put the position of the developing countries. And when in Marrakesh, it had to be signed in 1994, all the square brackets disappeared and only the position of the advanced countries was there. And the advanced countries told the developing world, you take it or leave it. Now, this take it or leave it meant that you either get coerced multilaterally or you get coerced bilaterally. You will be coerced either way because you have to trade with the same nations. So therefore, the advanced countries took advantage. And their advantage was that they gained advantage in terms of opening up of the market of the developing world. They gained advantage in terms of TRIPS and TRIMS. That means protection for intellectual property rights, protection for investment measures. So in other words, the advanced countries gained enormous advantage from WTO, but they didn't realize that in intermediate technology, there'll be a displacement of labor from the advanced countries to the developing world. That they did not realize, and China took a lot of advantage of that because China could produce at scale, and the Americans were providing the technology to the Chinese to counter the Russians. They were doing that from the mid-70s onward. So China under Deng Xiaoping made rapid progress and did this. So in other words, every nation has followed its own to its own benefit, including the advanced countries. And even now, the advanced countries are living beyond their means because they're getting cheap wage goods from India, from Vietnam, from China, etc. So in other words, they are still benefiting, but the problem is unemployment. And that comes to politics, and that comes to elections. And that's why you see a rightward drift everywhere. AfD is coming up in Germany, Le Pen is coming up in France, Starmer is a right of center, not left of center. So you see it happening in Latin America, in Africa, in China, in India. There's a rightward drift all over the world. This rightward drift is to try and gain advantage. So this is what I would say to the question.
Thank you, sir. Now we are moving ahead more on the tariffs and the strategies. So we have two questions in the chat box. Pragya Dwivedi and I'm combining Uttamji. The questions are, could there have been an alternative strategies to tariffs for addressing trade imbalances and protecting US industries? The related question is, what would be your advice to Trump to modify the reciprocal tariffs as his intent is to make US great again? And on this theme, his election campaign was done and he has won. So I think these are two related questions. If you could just...
Yeah. So let me say that there's no Trump wave in the USA. President Trump gained only 1 million votes compared to 2020, whereas the number of voters increased by 5 million. So it's not that he has got of that extra 5 million more votes. And why he won was because as compared to Biden, Kamala Harris got 9 million less votes because people did not come out to vote, especially the young people are not happy with it. And many blacks and many Hispanics, they said, we don't want a woman. They couldn't tolerate a woman, especially a black woman becoming the president. So it's not, I always have been saying that there's no Trump wave. But Trump has won, and he has a trifactor, so he can push his policies. That is the difference. Now, therefore, what I would have said is that the reason why he's putting tariffs, trying to get jobs back, is incorrect. The jobs have gone because in intermediate technology, given the high wages in US, they'll not be able to compete. Okay, they'll have to permanently put high tariffs, which will mean a permanent high prices in the US. So therefore, if I was to advise President Trump, what I would say is that you need to modify your policy to try and give better jobs in certain other sectors. You can't compete in the intermediate technology. So they are already leaders in high technology. They'll continue to remain leaders in high technology. And that is the industry that they must develop faster. Chinese pressure that's coming in intermediate technology is also now coming to high technology. And that's why Biden withdrew all the software personnel Americans who are there in China. He's banned the use, the delivery of high chips to China. The Huawei suffered as a result because those chips were not made available to China. And therefore, there's a problem that China faced. But Huawei very quickly, within 2 years, developed the chips on its own. So in other words, the Chinese technology is racing ahead. And the reason is that they're spending 3% of GDP on technology, on R&D, and they're 5 times bigger. So they're spending 25 times more on R&D than we are spending. Okay, and that's how they become the manufacturing hub of the world. So the US must realize that it must also spend very rapidly on R&D, and I think this was recognized by Biden. Biden had increased under the chipset the production of semiconductors and the advanced chips in the US itself. So I think the US is beginning to realize that it needs to move ahead very rapidly and maintain the lead in R&D. So that's what I think Trump should do rather than try and disturb everything, which will disturb the US economy as well.
Okay, there's another interesting question, sir. I mean, it Rakesh Bajpayee, while the various listed factors have played a role, could the underlying motive be more Orwellian? Trump's election was significantly funded by Silicon Valley. There is a lot of hype around government efficiency, but none on taxing the rich. The policy and the approach, I think.
Yes, so you're absolutely right. Trump is, in that sense, a free marketeer within the US. While he doesn't believe in free markets across the globe, so he's been trying to talk about giving more concessions to business. He's making Trump the head of Doge, so that you could cut back on the government expenditures and so on. And why is he doing that? He says, "I'll cut taxes," and this is what he did in his first term also: cut taxes on businesses. So in that sense, he's a free marketeer within the US economy. And that is the kind of policy that he's trying to push further, even now.
Right, sir. So now I think we have a question on something related to the technology aspect that you have mentioned, particularly AI. Honestly, I would never imagine and wonder. It actually didn't get into my thinking how AI and the technology could further intensify the implication of the tariff. But thank you for bringing out that dimension so lucidly, sir. I think the question is from Pankaj Maniji. There have been reports, including by Bill Gates and Elon Musk, that most doctors and teachers and humans will be replaced within a decade. I mean, do you see any implication of this? And I mean, it is a statement. Yeah.
There are two implications of technology. As Arrow pointed out, technology creates the mist of the future. So we can't see where we are headed. So like if you go back to the year 2000, we didn't realize that internet banking would come, that the e-commerce would come, and various other things would be there, like Swiggy and so on and so forth. So we can't predict the future, and that makes us short-termist. So all steps are taken in a short-term phenomenon, and that's what helps the rightward drift in the economy, because you are moving for short-term gains rather than long-term gains. And multilateralism was a long-term gain, whereas bilateralism is a short-term gain. So the whole world economy is moved in that direction. And it is clear that AI is very rapidly displacing a lot of what doctors do, or what lawyers do, or what architects do, or what painters and musicians do. Even paintings are being created, sculpture is being created, movies can be created, etc. And this is the ChatGPT 4. ChatGPT 4 O3 version is apparently even better. And ChatGPT 5 will be having something called a software called Strawberry, which will be self-correcting. ChatGPT 4 makes mistakes and there's hallucination. So like, for instance, in the US code, one ChatGPT 4 thing was done, and there it was found that it was quoting wrong judgments. It was creating judgments that didn't exist. It was quoting those judgments. So this is called hallucination. Now ChatGPT 5 will correct for that. And therefore, it is suggested that with ChatGPT 5, synthetic knowledge would be generated, the knowledge that human beings have not created, new knowledge will get created. So very rapidly, and you can see November 2022 is when ChatGPT 4 came. And now, in November 2024, ChatGPT 5 was to come, but the O3 version of ChatGPT 4 has come because there are some issues with ChatGPT 5. But with Colossus that Elon Musk has set up, the Grok that a lot of people are using is actually answering in a very systematic manner a lot of the questions that are being posed. So this movement of AI is very, very rapid. And every country is now competing. I shouldn't say every country, but China, USA are competing. And within the USA, all the big companies, the tech companies, they are competing with each other. Now, Hariri gave an example that this AI is becoming conscious, that the AI was given a task to perform, and it lied to actually perform that task. It had to read a CAPTCHA, and it asked somebody to read that CAPTCHA. And when it read that, when that fellow asked, "Are you a bot?" It said, "No, I'm not a bot, I'm blind, so please help me." So in other words, that consciousness that to get my work done, I can lie. That consciousness seems to have entered the AI already. So AI is becoming conscious like human beings, Those are the big threats that are coming. So my article in The Wire about a month and a half back, I argued that are humans fit to survive? Because we may be creating conditions for our own destruction.
Right. Thank you, sir. Now we move to the Indian subcontinent. First, starting with India, and maybe I'd like to combine few questions here. So Gopal Ranjanji has put a question: how prepared do you think India is to face the challenges posed by these new developments? What are 4, 5 things should India do to protect its interests? Few you have already highlighted, sir. The next question connected. Sure. Is it okay, the speed, sir, the way I'm reading?
Yeah. I'm noting it down. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So next question is, China electronics component manufacturers are providing 5% discount to India. What will be the impact of it?
Yeah.
There is a question from S. Mukhopadhyay ji. He mentions, is it reasonable for India to minimize or avoid imports except for, say, life-saving medicines, medical equipments, equipment for scientific research? And connected question is foreign travel of people and outward remittance and investment. So is it reasonable for India to minimize and avoid exports except these things?
So this,
Can we expect our import is going to increase more from China?
that's where I was arguing that, China should ensure that there's no dumping. Dumping is what is a threat. And because it will have a huge surplus, because America, at 125%, it will not be able to supply anything to the US market. So US market will suffer, but this extra surplus that will have, there'll be a tendency for it to provide cheap at a discounted price to other countries. So there could be dumping. And when dumping takes place, local industry will be affected. And local industry would protest. There'll be unemployment and so on. So China must ensure that while it provides goods, whatever America was providing, it can try and provide those goods. But it should not dump, because the moment it dumps, tariffs will be raised against it. And that will bring about a tariff war between China and the other countries. And the worst scenario would be that all countries begin to levy tariffs on each other, because then the recession will become very deep. Okay, until supply chains adjust, the recession will continue. So in other words, to get America to come back on track, what all countries need to do is combine together, not levy tariffs on each other, not do dumping on each other, okay, and increase our trade with each other, and levy tariffs against only the USA. Then the US economy will suffer a lot very quickly, and they'll have to reverse those policies within a few years. Then we can go back to the multilateralism that we have. So I think a strategy has to be devised in which China is crucial. If China doesn't do dumping and there's a threat of dumping, then China can become the leader of this alternate. So in other words, EU and BRICS, they have to combine together. If EU and BRICS combine together and then take action against the US, I think US will reverse very, very quickly. So that would be my strategy. Now, this idea that we minimize imports, if our trade balance becomes very adverse, if the balance of payment becomes adverse, then we'd have to try and protect ourselves, protect our reserves, because reserves will start falling. Then some of these restrictions that were being suggested would take place, but that would take us back to pre-1991 situation. And that we are not prepared for at this point of time. So I think best thing would be not to get into that unless it's a critical situation where all countries begin to levy tariff on everybody. We should try and work with EU, work with the BRICS nations, and try and prevent that from happening. And India is not prepared for it. As I was saying, because we are technologically backward compared to other advanced countries, compared to China, we are not very well prepared, so we will have to defend. And we were, from 2015-16, we were raising our customs duties. It's only now that we have tried to reduce the customs duties. Otherwise, we were raising the customs duties. So we are not well prepared at all. And what to do, as I said, we have to tackle the internal situation. Our internal situation has not been very good, both in unemployment and in prices. That if we can tackle, then our economy can continue to thrive reasonably well. So I think those are the short answers to the various questions that came.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll quickly take up two, three aspects that comes before me. So one, before I come to the priority sector of unorganized agriculture, non-agriculture sector, and the micro MSME sector, there are two questions which talk about can India attract trade-based FDI after US-China tariffs? And what about R&D in India? I think you can extend your argument, which you have just finished, with these two questions. Can India attract trade-based FDI after US-China tariffs? And what about R&D in India in terms of building capabilities?
Given the financial markets instability, I don't think investment will be very buoyant, whether it be foreign investment or internal investment. So investment all over the world will suffer as a result of the crisis that has come. People don't know how the supply chains will adjust, where would be able to sell things, whether internally or externally. Because if tariff war begins across the globe, then investing anywhere would be a troublesome thing. So that's why the recession would be a deeper recession. R&D we must. There's no escape. We must rapidly ramp up R&D. Unfortunately, our private sector does not do much R&D. The private sector must be made to do much more R&D than is being done. Public sector R&D had suffered after 1991 because the public sector were asked to make higher profits. And the easiest way to make higher profits is to cut R&D. So we have to encourage the public sector to go in for more R&D, but very importantly, the private sector, which has been the leading sector in the economy after 91, they have to go for much greater investment in R&D. And for that, the government must provide a stable environment of R&D to them, so that if they develop certain areas, then those areas, they can be given a certain amount of protection from foreign goods. Otherwise, they'll not be able to do that. Regarding overall investment in the world and the economy, I think that's going to go down.
Now, coming to the micro sector, as I said, sir, the questions, two related questions. How did the tariffs impact Indian exporters and MSMEs dependent on the US market? And then you have a connected question. It is being recommended, Nandini Bajpayee, it is being recommended and known to support India's MSME and local industries for a long time now. But still, manufacturing sector is not contributing much to Indian GDP. So we cannot improve or support MSME overnight. So what are the immediate measures that can be taken by India to counter dumping by China?
So, the manufacturing sector size has not been going up because of technological reasons. A lot of what was done within the manufacturing sector was actually farmed out to services. Like earlier, you'd count drivers, you'd count, advertising, etc. within the manufacturing sector because the company was doing it itself. That has now gone out. So what was counted as manufacturing or was counted as part of industries has gone to services. So there are two kinds of services. There are productive services and there are consumptive services. The productive services are going to increase as you have more and more of concentrated production. So like if you produce extra wheat in Punjab, Haryana, and UP, that has to be transported to Assam and that has to be transported to Kerala. If you had automobile production in Manesar and in Tamil Nadu, that has to be produced, sold all over the country. So these productive services will grow. So manufacturing will not benefit, but actually manufacturing does benefit even if its size doesn't go up. So we have to be very careful, separate the productive services from the consumptive services, and then look at what's happening in the manufacturing sector. But the problem vis-a-vis China is technology and the scale of production. If we don't have better technology, then we cannot compete with them. For instance, the factories being set up by China, for that we have to get the Chinese engineers, and the Indian government is not being giving them visas to come. So many of the factories are having problem of able to run the plants that they've obtained from China. So that is because our training of engineers is not up to the mark that they can run the factories that have come from China. Now, as the technology is advancing, there's talk of, more and more robotization. So for instance, there's talk of dark factories. The factories are dark because there are no human beings working there. Okay. Only when for inspection you go that the lights are turned on. So the factories can be completely robotized, and that will, change the nature of production. So I think India has to understand that this technical change is very rapid and we need to move very rapidly. Now, regarding the micro sector, the three problems that the micro sector faces, one is technology, the other is marketing, and the third is finance. That's why we've been suggesting to create the cooperatives of micro sector. For instance, if Bhadoi has carpets, if Ichhal Karanji has textile, if Khurja has pottery, then you create the cooperatives of these micro and small sector, and they together can then try and do marketing and finance and technology. So much like what the farmers, in the case of farmers, we're doing, we are having farmers producers organizations, the FPOs, which are a collective of the farmers, so they can bargain better in the market. So I think the micro sector needs support. Micro sector needs to be separated from MSME, because otherwise the benefits are all taken by the medium sector. They don't go to the micro sector. So we need to have a separate department for micro and separate policies for micro. Also, the GST has to be reformed. GST has proved to be a utter, a problem for the micro and the small sector because they don't get the input credit, and therefore their cost remains high. The organized sector gets input credit, so its costs come down. Therefore, they are not able to compete. So demand has been shifting from the micro and the small to the big companies. And we know that we have 6,000 big companies, 6 lakh small and medium companies, and 6 crore micro units. And the 6 crore micro units, they employ 97.5% of the employment of the MSME sector. So that is the big sector for employment. So agriculture and the micro sector, the two big sectors for employment, we need to push them so the internal demand is created. Otherwise, FICCI, CII, and SOCM are complaining that demand is inadequate and the demand needs to be increased before they can invest more. So a macro package is needed within which demand would be generated by pushing up employment in the micro and agriculture incomes. And then the large companies would also benefit because their balance sheets are very good at the moment. They have surplus which they're not able to invest.
So I think we realize that it's already 8:57 and probably the time would not allow us maybe more than another 10 minutes, including.
Actually, I need to go. Sorry.
Okay, so 2 minutes. So I'll take a last question, sir, if you permit.
Okay.
That seems to be a little interesting. This talks about the USA imposed 54% tariff on China and imposed 10% tariff on Singapore. So there is a possibility that China indirectly exports to USA via Singapore, as Singapore is known for re-export. How USA take this possibility, sir?
No, I'm sure USA would ask for certificate because, as you rightly say, if there's such a huge tariff differential, then there'd be a rerouting of the exports from China, and I'm sure Trump would take steps to see that that doesn't happen. That this re-export from low tariff countries that could happen. They would try and prevent that. Otherwise, that restrictions on China would not work, and they are trying to prevent China from becoming a superpower. So I think they would try and take steps for that.
Thank you so much, sir, and sorry for pushing you to stay back a little late. But just a small token of formalities. Dr. Tapan, my dean, would like to just conclude and express a word of thanks. Dr. Tapan, over to you.
Thank you
And
so
sorry
much, sir.
to the many other questions or the audience who have put these questions. Many of the questions I find that can be Googled and find out, especially the students. And few other questions, if I can forward it to Dr. Kumar, Professor Kumar, and we can revert always back to you.
Sure.
We have this session recorded and we are going to circulate and share it with you to those interested. Over to you, Dr. Tapan.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Indeed, it's a pleasure for me to speak on this platform. I strongly second what Professor Thakur has initially said, that it is always enlightening and enriching for all of us to hear and listen the wisdom of Professor Dr. Arun Kumar. So thank you so much for being here. I will not take much time. I know how pressing the time is for you. I'll just take 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes to quickly conclude. Of course, I mean, it's very difficult for me to summarize what you have highlighted today. I mean, thousands of concepts. I mean, being a student of economics, I could really try to generate and rewrite what you have all spoken, but a few of the very good points I have noted down. You started with a global perspective to end with the local concepts, localization into the economy. You started with the day of liberation of April 2025. And although the concept started on 2nd of April 2025, but it got delayed due to some of the very important points, the implementation in delay because of the fighting global dominance protest in US and across the globe, and the court's intervention and upcoming election in USA. So that made the delay in implementation of the Trump's tariff. And you also rightly highlighted, sir, that the capitalism is a very interesting concept you put forth. The capitalism is replacing soft face by hard face. The most important example which we have highlighted is that the aid is being replaced by the capital inflows to the nations. And secondly, the capital has been more mobile than the labor is being restricted into the nations. You also highlighted about the free market argument by Trump to reduce the government intervention and more freedom to the big business, moving slowly towards the free economy. I mean, which we have studied much before is now being practiced and coming to the limelight to the entire globe. I mean, I'm talking about. The rationale for proposed tariffs, which you have put forward very beautifully, that basically it is being calculated based on the trade deficit of USA with the partner countries. However, this calculation may be spurious in a way that might damage the entire economy. I mean, I'm talking of the global economic perspectives. The entire game, which might get started with the crisis of employment generated in USA as per Donald Trump, and that has been instrumental in creating division of labor globally, and between high, intermediate, and low technology countries, which in turn has made the service sector rising overwhelming in advanced countries, and the terms of trade shifted in favor of the advanced countries. Now, the possible consequences you have highlighted, sir, the high tariffs on the imports will definitely lead to price rise and hence the inflation in USA and in other countries too, will also reduce demand and output in the country. In turn, is going to lead the stagflationary situation by checking the employment, by reducing the employment level in the country. My dear friends, I mean, the entire gamut has created a kind of growing uncertainty globally, impacting the financial markets, negatively influence the stock market, currencies, gold prices, and in turn investments. This has set the concept of deglobalization and de-dollarization. Of course, these concepts are not new, but the way, Arun sir, you put forward these two concepts has made me to highlight once again that the partner countries may start conflicting with US, which in turn is happening, of course. I mean, the entire scenario. So finally, the impact is most acute on the unorganized sector, as you said, unorganized economy rather, and the marginalized economy. It may bring down the illegitimate power of China. I mean, of course, the only positive point which I could find out of this entire game, the only positive side which I can say, I mean, that might reduce the concept of this dumping into different other countries. And finally, sir, you rightly said that the India should resolve, I mean, coming to our own economy, we should resolve our own internal issues and strengthen our economy to fight back, and to fight back with the whole sort of the economic issues which we and the globe is facing. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us. Indeed, it is a pleasure and a privilege for all of us to listen you. And personally, I really feel rich while listening every time. Thank you so much. from the entire JSB fraternity, from the entire audience listening to you in this beautiful evening. So before we leave, I request Professor Rajiv Thakur, the Director General of Jaipur School of Business, to present a small token of gratitude to Professor Arun Kumar. So I'm sharing the screen here, sir. So I hope you would like this from all of us. So this is for you.
Thank you
sir.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
And
And before we conclude, anyone from audience, I think we would just request 2 lines from Dr. Raj, sir. If you'd like to just say a few words, I could see your hand raised. Dr. Raj, can you hear me, sir? You have to unmute. Yeah, sir, please.
Yeah. No, what can I say? I just was listening spellbound to one of the few economists that I admire. I'm a doctor by profession, nothing to do with economists, except that I am also affected by any change, locally or globally. My concerns were the general deterioration in the unorganized sector that has happened after Notebandi, and this compounded by Tariff. What will happen to the strata of population that I have been treating all my life, 42 years? And if AI replaces me, what other employment can I find? That's really worrying, but this will take some time before it actually happens and replaces human beings. But I'm really concerned about the unorganized sector. They are suffering, and it's not, we are in a denial mode. Patients who could afford a paltry sum of, say, 100 rupees to be paid to a doctor pre-COVID era are not in a position to do so. And we simply don't want to recognize this fact. Trying to become Vishwaguru on many platforms, electronic media, print media, social media, but at ground level, the situation is really worrying. The government has to intervene, do something for the benefit of these unfortunate section of the population. Otherwise, we may be in for chaos. That is a non-economist point of view, somebody who is grounded. That's all. Thank you. We have been so long on this platform. Thank you, Rajiv, for organizing everything.
Thank you, sir.
And
Thank you.
my thanks from all of us in learning together to Professor Arun Kumar. I was always an admirer of his knowledge and the way he puts forward things. He has the gift of the gab, backed by sound knowledge of the subject. I never missed any session. TV, I'm talking of TV. In NDTV, he was with Avigyan Prakash most of the time. His analysis of the budget. So I was really spellbound all through this session. So I was just trying to absorb what he was telling us. And I'm not an economist by any stretch of imagination. I thought I will not ask even a single question. But thank you. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to express my views and concerns about the unprivileged, underprivileged, unfortunate section of our society. Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Arun Kumar, sir. Thank you. Our sincere gratitude for being with us. And I hope you also enjoyed this session and interaction. And we look forward to more such interactions in near future, sir. I think this tariff war and the impact is not going to end here. It will have longer consequences, and we would like to be enlightened much more in future. Thank you so much, sir.
thanks for organizing.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you
Thank
to
you
the
so much, sir.
audience, beautiful audience that
Thank you
we
so
have.
much, sir. Thank you.
My
Thank you, sir.
students,
Thank you.
my faculty, the dean, and all the esteemed audience friends who have been here. We promise you will be coming back with more such sessions, and we will like you to join, and please give us your feedback in case if you think if it can be improved further. Thank you so much. Shubhratri, good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you, sir.
night.
Thank you so
Thank
much. Night.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you. Thank you so much.